Welcome to the Same Day Podcast, where we discuss driving incremental business growth and other topics related to real estate, property management, and entrepreneurship. Now to the show at hand.
Matt Zalk here. I'm the host of the Same Day Podcast, where I connect with top business experts and real estate leaders. Past guests on our show include Devin Howland talking about economic development in Fayetteville, Arkansas, Jonathan Schmidt of the Keyrenter team talking about property owners frequently asked questions, and Kevin Evans of Liberty Air Services talking about HVAC systems, how they work, and why they are so darn complicated. Today's episode's brought to you by Chris Lyle State Farm. Chris Lyle State Farm helps you protect your most precious assets and investments. Doesn't matter whether it's your home and auto, investment rental properties, or other valuables. Call Chris Lyle State Farm for a quick and painless phone call that will potentially save you double digits on all of your insurance needs. Visit diallyle.com or call his office at 918-878-7771. Today's episode is also brought to you by Keyrenter Property Management. At Keyrenter Property Management, we are a full-service property management company helping our clients buy, renovate, and operate real estate assets. We help our clients build wealth while taking the headache out of real estate ownership. Listen, Danny, you know this better than anybody else. You're in the business. It's the middle of summer. The electricity goes out at a rental, and it shuts down the AC unit. There probably isn't any worse situation or time for the maintenance issue to arrive. It's important to have the relationships that allow you, as the property manager or management company, to get some person, an electrician, hopefully, out there ASAP to solve the problem. It's not easy, but it's how we've built our business and reputation through reliable and responsive and trustworthy vendors like Michael over at Lighted Up Electric, who we love. But that is why it doesn't matter what rental you have, a single family home, condo, townhome, apartment, we have the management solutions that you need to take that headache away from you. You can go to keyrenterpmc.com or email us at info@keyrenterpmc.com in order to get more information. Today's guest, Danny Schwab, is the owner of Keyrenter Property Management in South Florida. Danny has extensive experience working in the property management business. He's been doing it for 30 years. He has owned and managed residential investment properties for that long. So happy to have you. Danny Schwab, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's an honor to be here with you today, Matt.
I love it. It's an honor. The honor is truly mine. It's an honor to be with you, Danny. It's clear from your light setup that you've done a lot of podcasts, that you were part of the wave of COVID at home podcasting, meeting people with your ring light. So it's really, if this is the first time you've been on video since 2020, that's I feel the honor is mine.
I'll go with that.
It looks good. Let's talk. Okay. First and foremost, where are you located? What are you doing? How long have you been in business?
Sure. So I'm in residential property management down here in South Florida, which I consider to be Palm Beach County and Broward County. When we talk about Miami, that's basically you're living in another country. So I live in the areas that some people might recognize, obviously Fort Lauderdale, some upscale areas as you go north into Palm Beach County are Boca Raton, Delray Beach, and then far north to Jupiter and Palm Beach Gardens, where you have the Michael Jordans and Tiger Woods of the world.
But that's a pretty like significant gap geographically.
Yeah, you know what's funny about that is that my first
longitudinally.
Yeah, it is. So it's definitely runs north to south, not really east to west, right? So we're pretty much predominantly on the water, upscale areas of that. And you know what's funny is that my first property I got was in Vero Beach, which is about 60 miles north of my territory.
Home of Piper Aircraft. I love that.
There you go. So I took it on. It was my first property. I knew it didn't make sense, but I was excited. I just moved to Florida from California, and it was my first call. So I was excited. I landed it, a 55 up community, 2-bedroom, 1-bath.
Wow.
And not exciting property, but I was excited to be in, to start this version. So this was January of 2017. I just relocated from California. My second property was in basically Aventura in North Miami. So they were 120 miles away from each other. So the only way I could ever get there was I would go on Sundays. I'd get up at 6 a.m. on a Sunday. I drive to Vero Beach and then come down, go take the turnpike down to Miami, and then, be home by noon. And
oh my God.
Property, set up showings, and realized really quickly that wasn't going to work.
But somehow you still have from Jupiter. What's the furthest north that you go? I'm just looking at the map.
So right now I have properties.
Vero Beach is up there.
Right. I have properties in Port St. Lucie, the home of the Mets.
Okay.
Spring training. And that is about, I'd say, 40 minutes north of where I currently live.
Okay.
And then Aventura in North Miami, I have a couple of condos I still manage. But I would only take on, nowadays, I really predominantly, let's say, are from Oakland Park, Fort Lauderdale. The Las Olas is an upscale, trendy part of Fort Lauderdale. And then north, as I said, to Port St. Lucie, which Port St. Lucie is a really interesting area.
Okay, so just for those people that don't know the East Coast that well, Aventura, north of Miami, it's 102 miles up to Port St. Lucie by drive, according to Google Maps. It's an hour and 44 minutes on the turnpike, probably now a little bit longer than other times because it's a Monday morning when we're recording this. But ultimately, that's 102 miles. Even at the best time, that's basically an hour and 20 minutes, an hour and a half. If you're really putting the pedal to the metal.
Yeah,
so that's a good spread. And just to cover, goes Aventura, Fort Lauderdale, Pompano Beach, Boca Raton, Boynton Beach that you might have heard of, Delray Beach that you might have heard of in that not that order, Lake Worth Beach, West Palm Beach, Palm Beach Gardens, Jupiter, up to Port St. Lucie. So that's a lot of territory that you're covering.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sir.
How many properties are you managing right now?
In this territory, about 300.
Got it. So it's pretty significant.
Yeah. So the way I look at it is that Boca Raton is kind of like what I like to refer to as the Beverly Hills of South Florida. Very upscale. Some people refer to it as the fifth borough of New York. There's lots of New Yorkers, lots of like wealthy people live there. So that's kind of in the dead center from where I live is to the north. Boca Raton's dead center, and then Fort Lauderdale is pretty close to Boca. So I have an office in Fort Lauderdale, about 25 minutes south of Boca Raton, and I kind of hit that midweek and try to focus on that area. And then you brought up COVID and lockdowns, and a lot of us predominantly work from home, so it's been pretty easy for me to organize it. I have team members, property managers, right? You hire people down south, and you develop the vendor relationships. One of the most positive things about it is that I network with other property management companies, right? Yeah. And I say, hey, what areas don't you want to cover? What are you not interested in? I'm happy to take on your overload and represent you in the best way possible. So I've made some good connections over the years with other property managers and other BDMs of other companies that refer me business.
The other thing that I thought you were going to say, but you didn't, is that you develop relationships with vendors in different areas. And that's really helpful. So if somebody only does Aventura or Miami and somebody else does Port St. Lucie, you've got a pretty vast network, I would imagine, of vendors. And if it's a Sunday and you need something done, somebody's doing you a favor, but you give them so much business that they're happy to do you a favor once in a while. For them to go from Port St. Lucie to West Palm Beach is one thing. From Port St. Lucie to Aventura is something else. A little bit of a different favor, but you have 5 HVAC contractors or 10 HVAC contractors that you really trust, that you give a lot of business to, that would do that favor, that would potentially do that favor, and that'd be helpful, I would think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny you say that, right? The first was a Sunday, and I reached out for a couple of favors. I had no hot water on a move-in on Sunday, and had to reach out to a guy. Probably had to drive 40 minutes from his house each direction. Yeah. He was happy to do it from the way he acted and responded. But yeah, the vendor relationships, I think, are very undervalued in our world. Some of the best referrals I've received in this industry come from, vendors. They see everything, and that's why I've always tried to work with the independent contractor, the independent owner of his business that is actually working in the field, not the bigger company. I feel like you get great relationships, and they're also your eyes and ears of your properties.
Totally. They go, hey, there's a blade missing on your fan. You should probably notate that and get somebody to fix it. Or the place looks like crap. You should fix it, and whatever else. Absolutely. Tell me, so what's your history of property management? How long have you been doing this?
Absolutely. So I bought my first investment property in 1994. And
God, how old are you?
I was,
oh my God.
I turned 50 in about a month. So I've been doing this since
You look good for 50. You don't even have any gray hairs. Most property managers have a lot of gray hairs.
I'm just, you gotta
Live in that South Florida
sometimes
life.
thank your genetics, got good genetics. Ashkenazi in me has done well.
I love it.
So yeah, I was didn't have the greatest collegiate career, and I was definitely always working, always grinding and different things, and
Yeah.
I just love that real estate bug. I love the trenches. I love walking neighborhoods, gentrifying neighborhoods, seeing things, seeing the way buildings laid out on a block,
Yeah.
which were set back and had small small square footages, and which ones the brick. Growing up in Chicago, we have a lot of brick buildings, right? The Great Chicago Fire, everything burned down and everything was rebuilt in brick. So we have these buildings that are 100, 125, 150 years old. They were just amazing. So I just really got into that, and I kind of built slowly, buying investment properties, fixing them up. I mean, I've made every mistake you can make. In my 20s, thinking, oh, I met this wonderful cocktail waitress. She's very stable. I'm going to rent her an apartment without doing a background screening or confirming anything about her. And, go to collect rent. No one's been there in weeks. You can say the refrigerator doors open.
Oh my God.
I've been there, done it all. But yeah, I developed about, 16, 17 buildings and 60 units under management by, the good times of the 2008, 2009 recession.
Uh-huh.
And, I was a genius in a lot of ways. End of 2006, I said, at the height of the market, I decided I would be a great time to get into real estate development.
Mm-hmm.
I took on some huge loans, took on some really, really big projects that kind of died about 6 months to a year later. So,
wow. What did you learn from that lesson?
One of the main things I learned from that lesson is that profits and assets are very different, than worth, right? When you're heavily invested in a property and you put all this money in developing it and you feel like you've made it, right? You've got it, it's rented out now. That's paper assets, right? It could all disappear in a second.
Mm-hmm.
So it really showed me a lot about not buying something, creating equity in the property, learning that there is no, just getting the property and buying it. I was just trying to accumulate property, right? I didn't really focus probably as much on the best areas or the best building. It was like, if I could get an asset and I could get it for, no doc, no verification, no money down, I would do it. And I realized that I was just creating a house of cards. But what I really learned is that, there are no shortcuts, that, taking a property, taking care of it, putting in really good tenants, paying attention to it, taking care of it, you can definitely build up, a great wealth. And you can transfer great wealth to family through real estate. So I didn't, some of the lessons that I think I take on today are just really focusing on, a lot of people look at assets in real estate, investors, like, I just want to buy something, right? So I'll buy a C+ property in a C area. I can buy something for 50,000, 80,000, these markets. And that's a popular thing with a lot of people, and I get it. I believe that I'd rather have one larger asset in a B neighborhood or an A neighborhood than having 9 assets spread out. And I've really focused on that. And, into my personal investments now, I try to look at higher quality, more expensive assets in better neighborhoods.
The implication is you'd rather have one $600,000 house than 6 $100,000 houses. Is that right?
I personally would, yes. I feel that, looking at, especially here in Florida, where the smaller assets, condos, townhouses, always come with HOAs, which are very hard to navigate as an investor. I also feel that, something that, strategically over a long term, that asset will grow a higher rate of return, more stable environments, right? Typically, single family homes, as we say in property management, are more stable investments than smaller 2 flats or they call them duplexes now. It's an old Chicago term, right? The 2 flat.
Yeah, I mean, the only challenge with that is that the number of tenants that you're putting into 6 units is 6. The number of tenants you're putting into 1 unit is 1. And so if that one stops paying rent, you're paying for that out of pocket if there's a vacancy, where if you have 6, you stagger them at points and you can still cover your mortgage and other stuff.
Absolutely. I think that a lot of people, which I think are intelligent people, and I'm not saying it's a wrong way to look at it, but to me, the equity that you grow in your buildings in upscale areas far outweighs the cash on cash returns that you hear these people pontificate all over the internet, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I wouldn't buy something if it didn't get a 10 cap. You don't get 10% return on your money, or it's not worth 1%. I feel that from my career and what I bring to the table is the add value. As long as I'm in the right area with the right piece of property, I want something that I need to come in and create a huge add value to. Add a master, like currently I'm working on a big project where I'm adding about 800 square feet, master suite, building an addition above the garage. A lot of people look at something like this and say, oh, wow, your carrying costs. It's going to take you a year to get this done with permits and dealing with Palm Beach County and the addition and architects and everything. But I know when this is all done, I've created in a 1-year span a huge amount of equity that would take me multiple years to get anywhere near that, working on smaller investments.
And what are the numbers? What are the numbers on that? For example, you're building at $200 a square foot and it's worth $400 when you're done, or something like that.
Yeah, I can get into if you really want. I'm an open book. If you want to hear all the numbers, I'm happy to go into that. But
let's just talk rough numbers.
Yeah, I think that when said and done, you hit the nail on the head. It's going to be worth $400 to $425 a square foot. Purchased it at around $220 a square foot.
Yeah.
Carrying costs, are rough. During this period.
What does it cost you to build? What does it cost you to build in Palm Beach County?
In addition, rough is about $125 a square foot.
Great,
for the rough,
huge
but that
delta.
doesn't. And then obviously it could, depending on how nice you want to make it, right? Depends on what your finishes are, right? So I think I'm going to get in for $260 a square foot, $270 all in. And make it upscale, really nice.
That's including all your soft costs, all your permitting and architecture and everything else?
Maybe not. Maybe your carrying costs would add another, $25 a foot into that. It really depends. I don't look at it as a science, right? I'm not trying to spec it out on a sheet, account for all my costs. I'm looking at it on the big picture, right? I buy this in October of 2022. By December of 2023, which I hope to be done somewhere in that time, I feel like I'm going to take a property that I bought for $650. It's going to be worth, put in $350,000. It'll be worth $1.5 million. So I hope to make $600,000 in equity in that on paper, cover all my costs in the refi, but then I'm renting it out at, with a 10 cap, right? In this area, I believe I'll turn a 4-bedroom, 3.5 bath on over a third of an acre into a $7,500 a month rent.
Wow.
With hopefully enough equity left over to do it again, right? To pull out, buy another piece of land. Again, I don't think I'm a traditional investor. I think that, and I'm not saying that what other people doing are wrong. I just don't have the appetite for it.
You've touched on a couple of things I want to talk about. One is depreciation. So now you have an asset that you can depreciate much. It's a higher book value asset that you can depreciate and take more off your tax liability. A lot of people don't consider depreciation when they're thinking about returns. They think about appreciation, they think about cash on cash, but they're not thinking about the actual benefit of saving 40% or 37%, whatever it is, off their, top line income number. So I think that's super important. The second thing I want to touch on, which is far more important, is can you actually get $7,500 come December of whatever? I want to talk about seasonality of rentals in the South Florida market. And I also want to talk about year-on-year changes. What are you seeing in terms of, let's start with
it's been a roller coaster, right?
Yeah.
You can, Florida is a big, touch point in this whole world of red state, blue state, tax savings. Obviously here in Florida, we don't have, federal, we don't have state, capital gains tax. So a lot of people have moved here. This is part of why I went into this particular area, because I would consider this area an A++ area.
Wow.
So Florida has always been the haves and the have-nots, right? On one side of the highway, one side of the road, you've got the mansions that have been there facing the water or the intercoastal. Across the street, you have the shacks where the workers and the average man live in that neighborhood. So Florida is very much like that. And we've seen, from March of, 20 to the January of 22, most rents went up by between 100 to 125%
Wow.
in areas where you would consider them a safe upscale or a safe neighborhood, a good neighborhood, right?
So something that
Florida
rented for
is
$2,000 is now renting for $4,000, $4,200.
100%. You look at
Wow.
areas of like Boca Raton, Delray Beach, Jupiter. We used to get 15 to 1,800 for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. We used to get 800 for a studio to a 1-bedroom. I'm seeing $1,900 1-bedrooms that used to be 800. Right.
Wow.
I'm seeing single family homes in that 22 to 2,400 mark now renting for 45 to 4,800. Now, this isn't you take that property and you just double the rent, right? There have been improvements made, right? These are some properties where you had to rip out the carpet, put in the vinyl plank flooring.
Yeah.
You had to paint, update lighting. I'm not talking about structural improvements, new roofs, new impact glass, all these very expensive items, but cosmetic improvements to get it.
Yeah.
What we've seen also is that, so many of people have moved here, and these people that were living here, were living in these neighborhoods, paying these rents, obviously could no longer afford it. So what that did is that moved them out of those areas, and so that the competition in areas that things just didn't rent it, things that were just historically very slow, people didn't really want to live there, further out, not good schools, farther commutes, those areas grew too because people had nowhere to go.
Sure.
The influx of people, and we've all heard the stories. I've heard anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 people a day were moving to Florida. I mean, the numbers in Palm Beach County in 22, I've heard somewhere in the number 250 to 300,000 people moved into our county,
Wow.
which isn't a big area. There aren't a lot of major cities. So the rent market, blew up. Housing sales blew up. Rents to then I'd say around. When we talk about the season, right? Season is typically November through May, right? That's
So
when
your peak leasing season is November to May.
I'd say our peak leasing season has 2 markets, right? We have that November, December market. We get so many people to come here. We have so many people, are moving here and checking it out. And then we have a hot leasing season at the end of the season as well, because there's all this turnover, right? School start. Also, what's interesting about Florida is school starts August 1st. In most areas, school starts September 1st. So you have a little bit of a jump late summer because there's a lot of people that have been moving here. Everything's up in the air since when Florida completely changed.
Yeah.
I mean, I was living in a house that was valued, rental property when I moved here, or not when I moved here, in right before the pandemic, before I purchased my home, that was renting for $2,400 a month. Now that house rents for $5,000 a month.
Wow.
In a 2-year period. So different areas in these upscale areas just blew up. It's been wild to see.
What about since 11 consecutive interest rate hikes? Consecutive, maybe not, because they didn't raise in the last meeting. But what has that done to your rents? Are rents actually coming down at all, or are they just flat?
Yeah. So again, it was always a flight to quality, right? People were leaving upscale areas because they couldn't afford to live there, and people were moving into them. That really slowed down. Rent stabilized. Still not, nothing's ever going to go down in this near future or in the past in these Boca Raton, Delray, and Palm Beach Gardens and Jupiter. These are like our cream of the crop. We have a lot of pro tennis players and pro athletes live here, obviously for tax reasons and things like that. But other areas, rents have definitely stabilized, and in certain areas are going down. So as we look at, let's say, renewals, over this last 6 months, we are not raising rents. We're asking people to renew at the same rate, and there's been a few instances where we've cut rents by a small amount just to keep the tenant in a tough negotiation. Part of it, obviously, for me, in my opinion, it has nothing to do with the market. It has to do with inflation and the cost, of renewing a lease if you lose them, the cost of rehabbing that unit, painting it, cleaning it up, the fees that we pay. So I really try to convince owners that, hey, it might not be sexy to take a little pay cut, but it's absolutely worth it to keep a good tenant in place, right?
Yeah. So let me ask you this.
Have a strong.
How are you having those conversations with owners that came on in 2020, saw massive jumps through 2021 and 2022 in renewals that are now having to plateau or come down a little bit? How does that impact the conversation, the nature of the relationship that you have with somebody that thought real estate is this amazing investment? I bought it in March, April, May of 2020 when prices probably had dropped a little bit because people were scared about what the future held for the pandemic. And then everything spiked and all rents went up. And now you're having a different conversation.
Absolutely. I think a good property manager, and part of our process and what our value is educating people on the realities of the world, right? People are emotional with their real estate and they're emotionally attached. I'm not emotionally attached to their real estate. So it's really easy to break down. Hey, listen, this tenant has been great. Pays on time. We do routine inspections. The place looks great. Our vendor needs to get in. They let them in. When you can communicate and work with someone, it makes life very easy.
Yeah.
I say to them, listen, I'm going to lose this tenant. Your place will be vacant for a minimum of a month, maybe longer. I make a fee of 1 month's rent. If I lose this tenant, you might be out $10,000 to $12,000 over this year, or you're going to lose $600 in rent from the year before. Yeah. It's a simple thing, right? We also obviously work with the tenants to try to at least maintain the rent in these situations by sharing listings with them of other like properties to show that they are still getting the value working with us.
Yeah.
And I also try to imply that if you're happy with how we treat you, you're happy with our maintenance or repair services, we excel at a high level. Not all property managers do what we do. So I really try to kind of manipulate both sides of the equation to have a fit. But, there's always that owner that says, hey, no, plays hardball. They lose the tenant. And then they're very stressed out and very upset, and they learn a valuable lesson,
Yeah. Do any of those people then come to you and say, yeah, actually, I think what the truth is that we'll have a month of vacancy, but we'll be able to make up for that lost revenue, that lost income in rents that are $1,000 higher? And you say, look, I don't think that's the case, but I'm happy to try it.
Yeah. What's funny is it's the couples, right? It's the younger couples in their 30s that have gotten into real estate and, or they're emotionally attached to the real estate because they think it's so great, are always like, well, no, we're not, that's ridiculous. And they get upset. And you just really try to work with them where the market is, and I show them listings. I show them days on market for similar like property. And, it's a battle. You can't, I unfortunately ended a relationship with a owner of a condo building that just told me that he's raising the rent $300 because he has a $40,000 special assessment, and he is not gonna. That's it.
That. What can you do about that? We have owners that tell us, I have to cover my mortgage payment. I say, look, I didn't make the decision. The tenant didn't make the decision that you put it on a 15-year amortization instead of a 30, and your mortgage payment's $300 higher per month than the neighbor next door. They're leasing their property for $1,500. You want $1,800. What does a tenant do? They go to the $1,500 property. It's a difficult discussion, but
absolutely.
You have to help them understand that.
Easy. Right. It makes it very easy in these types of buildings where there's 300 units, and you show them what the units are renting for. It's always funny when like I have a background in the financial futures and financial market. I traded commodities briefly at the Chicago Board of Trade, and you see the people that think they make the market, right? Yeah. Those are the people that always get smacked. They do well for a while, and then they're just smacked down. The market is what the market is. What's the place going to rent for? I can give you an estimate of what the place is going to rent for, but I'd rather get it rented to a high-quality person in 15 to 20 days than maybe not a high-quality person at a little bit higher rent over 2 to 3 months. The numbers just don't make sense when you sit down and you plot them out. Obviously, that, but people are emotional. It's part of our job to educate people on the realities of what are happening today. But we're heavily seasonal, right? There's not a lot of action in Florida, June and July. It's hot and quiet here, and I will lower the price intentionally sometimes going into a weekend, right? We have properties listed on the MLS. We have properties listed through, 30 different rental networks. I like to lower the rent even artificially without fully vetting it out with the owners on a Thursday to a Monday just to see if I can get any extra showings, any market.
Yeah.
And then usually do and usually get an offer, and you can go to the owner, hey, I got an offer a little under market. I really like this person, and they take it. I'm not saying I go against the rules of how it should be, but sometimes you have to help people from making the mistakes that you see are made over and over again. Vacancy is the worst thing in our business, right? Mold, leaks, squatters. We need people in the units, even if the rent isn't as high as you had hoped.
Right. In your market, do you have realtors that are showing, or leasing agents that are showing prospective tenants the units, and then they come to you represented, or do they just submit an application?
We have all kinds of things. We have HOA communities in upscale areas where it's very difficult to do a showing without a leasing agent and realtors. We have older, wealthier people that would never go onto Zillow and search out their own units, where the only way to attract them is through the MLS. And then we have, other properties that we do self-access viewing, and we show it with our leasing team. We run the gamut, right? I manage multifamily properties, and I manage upscale single family homes in, gated communities. So obviously I prefer to rent it, through us, not just because we make more money, but when you're represented by someone who's a tenant, or an applicant's represented by someone outside of your organization, they don't get the information, right? Their realtor might be very uneducated in how things works, gives the tenant, poor information. I mean, I had a rough situation with a realtor recently who didn't explain to a wealthy 80-year-old man that was relocating from the Bahamas that just by signing a lease with us, they weren't approved by the HOA. He didn't understand. His realtor didn't
The
explain.
HOA has to approve an applicant?
In Florida, you have to do an application with an HOA. They have up to 30 days before they approve the tenant. So the whole process basically starts again. We background screen the tenant, we get the information, we approve them, we sign a lease. We then turn that over to the HOA, another set of applications. It's wild. And HOAs are notoriously slow and difficult. They're not always, sometimes people working in the HOAs are volunteers. They aren't always managed professionally. It's a very difficult process. I mean, it's wild. I would say that 60 to 70% of all new developments in Florida, at least in Palm Beach County, Broward County, are all built with the plan of them being HOA property.
Wow. Let me ask you this. Why do you end up managing HOA units? Why does an owner come to you with an HOA? Are they accidental landlords, or have they consciously made the decision that they want to invest in an HOA?
Great question. Majority of them are people that are accidental landlords. They owned a townhouse. They owned a condo. They bought a single family home. They relocated to Dubai for business, and they decided, hey,
I want to keep this. I'm on a low interest rate.
You also have the guy that owned a condo in his 20s, liked the community, and would just go around buying them. I have a client that lived in the community. He now owns like 9, 10, 11 units in his community and other ones because he likes it, feels comfortable, thinks it's a good investment. So we get all kinds.
Let me ask you this. With the shift in the economy, interest rates going up, people unable to buy stuff, inflation, making everything in life harder. It's just harder to make ends meet in general when we've seen inflation the way we have over the last couple of years. Are you seeing eviction rates go up? Are you seeing people struggling to pay the rent that they could 2 years ago afford to pay? They've renewed again, and they're just now, something has happened, they're struggling?
Yeah, I mean, I hear that more than I physically feel it. I think I've developed, systems in place to avoid that. I mean, I'm very choosy with who we let in financially. I'm not really renting to someone just based off their income. I'm basing it off that you can prove to me that you can afford to lose your job and still be able to pay your rent for 6 months.
Wow.
Seriously, because I dealt with that a lot in the past. It just became a very difficult situation. But yes, what I'm seeing more are people that can't afford their mortgage payments right now. People in different industries, a lot of investors that are real estate. Everyone's a realtor in Florida, right? Most of them are not doing more than 2 transactions a year. I'm seeing a lot of realtors like, I can't afford, I got to dump this. I'm seeing a lot of contractors and different people that rode that high, bought properties, and now they can't afford it. So I'm seeing a lot more people like that. But, we have a really good relationship with our tenants. I get to know them. Our people get to know them. I find it very easy to buy the keys, as we say in the industry, and have to go to eviction. But yes, I manage in the Jacksonville market. For people that don't know, that's the northern part of the state. I see a lot more of that in Jacksonville happening right now.
Interesting.
Not really in where I'm at, but yeah.
What's the process of buying keys like?
The process of buying keys is really simple. You know, when the tenant does not pay the rent, they have a history, you see it coming, right? You're chasing the rent. At one point, you 3-day notice, you say, hey, you turn off their ability to make a payment unless it's in full. You say, I'm no longer going to accept payments from you. You know, you can't piecemeal it anymore. This has to end. You've got till the end of the month or 15 days to get out of the unit. I'll help you find a studio. I'll help you, downsize to something else. I will meet you at the property. When you're out, we'll sign a release, a mutual release, and I'll give you some money out of your security deposit or last month's rent. I'll obviously discuss that with the owner, try to come to them. I have, their famous line is, I don't have enough money to move out. I can't rent a truck. No problem. Go get a U-Haul. I work with some guys that own and do a lot of inexpensive roof repair work. They're big guys. They have a truck. They love doing this stuff. Go to the recycling center, get boxes. We show up, and we move them out. We give them some money.
So how does it work? You give them a 3-day notice, and then you say,
after
the 3-day notice. The 3-day notice is a notice to pay or quit. First of all, let's be clear, right? Is that what that is? Okay. So but how do you have the precedent? How do you have the legal right to say I'm only going to collect rent in full? I'm not taking half. That's
because after you give somebody a 3-day notice, right? They have 3 business days or typically 5 days to make their payment in full. You don't have to accept a partial payment. You can only accept after that 5 days. You no longer have to accept payment.
Got it.
You turn it over. You go to the court. If the tenant wants to work something out, the tenant then has to respond to the court in 10 days.
Yeah.
And put in their money into the court registry.
Got it.
Most of the time, the tenants don't have the money, so that court registry situation doesn't happen. You get a judgment. So to avoid us paying our attorneys and doing that, this is all within a conversation with the tenant. I'm not talking about the legal authority. I'm saying this is the writing on the wall. I want to be your friend. I want to help you. I like you. I moved you in. Let me help you find a studio. Let's go live with family for a while. Get back on your feet, and then I'll be a resource to you. I'll help you find something. These are not people that are bums or drug addicts or people.
Yeah,
these are
people that are falling on hard times.
Right. They lost their job. They had a horrific car accident. Their wife is sick, and their income's gone. Like, don't end up on the street is my call to action. Let me help you.
And how much do you typically pay them to go, to get out of the house?
It's really a percentage. If you're holding a last month in a security, which these people typically are, I'm more than willing to give them their entire last month's rent just to leave.
Yeah.
We'll do the traditional security deposit disposition. You know, a lot of times if they're like okay with it, they're allowing us to do active showings. They're assisting us in showing it, because if we rent it to someone else, they get all their money back, right? I always have the conversation. Our team has the conversation when you move in. The old expression I like to say is if you corner a cat's going to come out scratching. We're not here to corner you. I'll show up at 7:00 at night. I'll knock on the door. I'll come by, grab some Dunkin' Donuts. It's 7 a.m. Go by their house if they're not responding to my call. I owned all my own properties in Chicago. So these are things I developed, over the years. Let me help you. Let me be an asset.
That's an interesting trick, bringing over Dunkin' Donuts and I'm here as a friend to help you instead of I'm here as your landlord to put you in a corner. I love that.
When you're suffering in life, everybody's out to get you.
Yeah.
You don't have a job. The bill collectors are coming. Everybody in our world, we write nasty emails. We send nasty. People have internet muscles. I'm your friend, man. I'm the one who's doing it, right? Let me help you.
Yeah. I love that. Tell me a little bit about the journey of scaling your business, of growing your business, of adding employees, of adding W-2, 1099 folks. What's the hardest part about owning a property management business?
Well, I mean, it's like I've said before, I don't get emotional about things, but this is like the hardest thing in the world, right? You hit these plateaus where you personally are maxed out with effort. You're doing so much in all phases of your business. So that's not scalable, right? So you have to bring up people. Yeah. The hardest part is like I was been saying, right? I developed these relationships with people. I think that the only way our business works is human contact. I think sending someone an email, explaining something, this is how we do it, they're not focused on it. They're not reading it. They're not understanding it, right? So you need to develop people that can reach out and touch somebody, can talk to them, can say, hey, does that make sense to you? So that's the hardest part, is training people to deliver our message, to our philosophy, to be able to, still be profitable as a business when you're adding W-2 employees. When I started doing that, my profitability went down by 50%. But I realized that my life got a lot better, So I think, hiring and training, I think, that old expression, quick to hire, slow to hire, quick to fire is huge. I've never had somebody as an employee that turned around, right?
If they're poorly performing, they don't start magically performing.
They never do. There's a certain thing in life, I know you have it. The first time I ever talked to you, there's these people that are like, get up and go, right? I'm going to succeed. I'm going to give a maximum effort. People, when you hire them in that interview, you feel that, right? Or otherwise you wouldn't hire them. Within the first 3 weeks, they're already not performing. You also have to really demand a lot out of people, almost more than they can perform. If you don't demand a lot of people, if you don't set up and say, hey, it's really hard to criticize someone to their face, right? It's really hard to sit with someone and say, I'm reading through the emails you're sending out to our owners, our tenants, and they're not at a high level. Let's sit down and work on it, right? Let me help. That's very hard for people. We get overwhelmed in our own world and what we're doing. And it's really important. I think the ultimate thing is training people, getting them to speak your message and to check them, regularly. Hey, this is not to the level that we need. We're going to give you one more opportunity. I had this with a woman that worked for me, and I realized, wow, I was looking at the calendar and on her hire date. She's been with me a year and a half. We've gone through this a couple of times. I've asked her to step up. She steps up, and then she backs down. And then over the weekend, I decided, I let her go today. It's just, if you're not trying to get better, right? There is no coasting in this world, in my opinion. Unless you're taking on more responsibility and get better, and people reach a level where they don't want to give any more effort. At that point, you got to cut them loose. So I think, using technology, using different platforms is the only way to really scale. We use remote team members in other countries so that our labor costs go down. We use different, platforms for our CRMs and our marketing to really try to connect.
The issue that we see is that you can go too far with technology, and you hit the nail on the head. This is a people to people business. On the tenancy side, on the ownership side, you need to be able to reach out and touch somebody. You said it. Pick up the phone and talk to somebody so that they can hear your voice. They can understand whether you're being funny or gravely serious. Right. And that doesn't always come through in an email. And the nuance of why you might want to keep rents flat or even decrease it $50 or $100 a month doesn't come through in an email. And so you can go too far with tech.
Yeah. And I'm not articulate enough in an email to get through to somebody, but in a person-to-person conversation, or, one of the best things, we joke around about, the Zooms and the pandemic. One of the best things is that I can get somebody that doesn't understand a lot of what I'm saying, reading an owner statement, and I say, hey, let's just jump into a Zoom. You let me know when you're free, and I want to be in front of my computer. I want to go through this with you. And if you go through that with an owner, you're building that trust. If you're walking them through your processes and you're able to speak to them on, hey, my best interest is your best interest, right? I'm a fiduciary to you. This is what I would do in my world. If this was my property, this is what I do. I'm 100% confident in this plan. They're going to listen to you 98% of the times. And the ones that don't, it doesn't go well. They ship up or ship out. I mean, the greatest thing about our industry, at least for my business, is I don't have one client that can affect my bottom line. There's not one client that I can say, hey, you and I don't see eye to eye. I really appreciate the business relationship we had. I think it's time that we that we're not a good fit for each other anymore. The second you say to somebody, I don't think I'm a good fit for you. Whoa, what do you mean? What do you mean you're not a good fit? They really want to understand it. I mean, obviously you got people, the psychos that just get upset and, you're good, they're gone. But people really want to understand where you're coming from And if you can speak on your experience and you can speak on things that work, I think you can really get people to follow your model. I hear you talk a lot on scaling, right? And you've scaled into me in an incredible way. And you just, every rung, right? We bump our heads on things. We got to figure it out. But it comes down to having quality people that speak our attitude, right? Speak our theory, speak our voice. And I think that's the hardest part, is to train that and not get lackadaisical, right? We accept mediocrity in a lot of ways in our lives, in things that we deal with. And when you're trying to scale a business, everything has to be tight. Everything has to be high level.
Yeah, it's so hard. I find it much easier to operate as a property manager than hiring great people to do that for you, to speak that message for you, to get somebody to take your philosophy, to take your words and cascade that out to an owner is way more difficult than just doing it yourself. And that's a big, but you cannot scale that way. So that's a big problem for a person that's moved from direct operations into management. It's a different skill set. It's a harder thing to do. And yet it's something that's critical. And hiring is such an important thing in scaling any business. You just cannot. Yeah. I don't know how. I have not cracked the puzzle, the mystery of how to hire the right people every single time. You switch your interview process. You try to make sure that you do role playing. You try to make sure that you discuss how urgent things are, that if you let a leak sit for a day, it's going to turn into mold, whereas fixing it immediately is the solution. And so if you're slow to hire and quick to fire, which I think is the right way to be, you also turn over employees, and then owners go, why do I have a new property manager every 6 months? So there's no easy solution. But Charlie Munger is fond of saying that we're in the business of business, and problems are that's just what we do. We solve problems. So you see a problem, you solve a problem, you see another problem, you solve a problem. You're never going to get to a point in any business where your problems are done. So it's just, you understand that at a management level. Right. Yeah. You understand that in management, this is what you do. You solve problems. And if you're frustrated by solving problems, or you cannot solve problems, then it's really hard to be in business.
Absolutely. I know you have young children. I do. I have a young child. I have pets. I have 2 dogs. I have cats. It's like, I feel like people like to say, oh, we put out fires all day. I like to say I clean up shit all day in my personal life, in my business life. It's just, you step in it, you got to clean it up. Right. And as long as, we are responsible for other people's most valuable asset. So as long as we are giving it a max effort, and our team understands that, I also think you have to find people of high moral ethos. Right. I think when we talk about, I've learned a lot from, my business development manager, him, Dusty, and he really, every owner that we bring on, every owner we talk to, he shares with them, our code, right? Our Keyrenter mottos and stuff. And I think it's really important to let people know that we're going to take care of things to a high level, even at your expense, right? The ultimate goal is that we have to take care of the property. We have to take care of the tenants inside the property to protect you from liability. And that's not the cheapest way to go. So from the start, we really let people know that we're not going to be your cheapest solution. Yeah. I'm confident that I'm going to be your best solution because I care, and everybody in my team really, really cares. But I'm not going to, so you really want to weed out in our world the bad tenants and the bad owners, right? The idea of the transactional real estate, find a tenant, put them in your place, boom, you're done. That's why I stay away as much as I can from realtors bringing me tenants. I want to meet them. I want to look in their car. I want my people to say, how is the relationship between the husband and the wife? Were they kind to each other? Were they excited to be in here, right? There's so many ways that you could step in property management, and those are the hard things, right? I hired a young kid to work for me about 2 years ago, because I was so sick and tired of people that I were hiring that already were established. They did things their way, right?
To retrain them.
I'm going to give up somebody who has a lot of knowledge and experience. I'm going to take a raw person, and he's going to frustrate the hell out of me, but I'm going to mold him into what I want as someone representing me in the field. And we've had a lot of highs and lows, and I'm super proud of this kid, 22 years old. he's an American citizen, but he was raised in Mexico, Mexican American, and got his GED. Is in college, taking classes. He's getting his real estate license, and he's changed his life. And I'm really proud of him. And man, I've had some tough moments. But I just feel better. Like that's one of the ways. Like I think you have to really develop your own talent at times, right? People look all shiny with their real estate license and I've worked for a major property management company. My portfolio included 150 units, but it's like, like we're saying, like how many times what's your connection with the owner, with the tenant? Like,
yeah,
can you tell me some about, I don't know. I sent him an email. My favorite thing when people tell me that I ask, hey, what's going on with this? What did the owner say? Where are we at? Oh, I contacted the owner. What does contacted mean? That's what I always say. Take that word out of your vocabulary.
I haven't heard back.
Right. I spoke to that person and this is what happened. Or I sent him a text, I sent him an email. Well, in my business, what I say for my business is that emails are the backup plan, right? Emails to cover your ass to get the information out, but don't consider that contact. Contact is verbal speaking or you're texting back and forth.
Yeah.
And we say things like, does that make sense to you? Do you understand? Because people hear what they want to hear in this world.
Well, valuable stuff that I need to take back to my team, make sure that we're having enough face-to-face, enough Zoom meetings, and enough verbal conversation, because I think we rely too much on email also. Yeah. Super important to make sure somebody understands something when you're saying
because we all use CRMs and we have these auto documents through our systems that go out 90 days before the tenant's lease expiration, saying the process. But come on, how many people are reading the emails, digesting them? We live in this world of reading 2 sentences and moving it out of that inbox, right? Clear your inbox, store the email somewhere. I'll get to it later, right? Especially if it's from your property manager or an owner. But it's also with acquiring new business, right? In our industry, we want to talk to that person and say, at least for me, I really want to know, why did you leave that other property manager? Why did you lose your tenant? Why do you have to evict your tenant? Like, what is this process, right? Some of the worst decisions I've made in this business is taking on owners that don't see eye to eye with me, right? That have this idea of like, one of the funniest experiences I had was like, I'm with an owner at one of their properties, and they're telling me they won't fix the roof because it's not in their budget. I have a budget for how much I can spend in maintenance per month. It's not in my budget. So I met them at the property. 4-year-old kid pulling on my shirt, saying to me, why is it raining in my bedroom? Can you stop it from raining?
Wow.
Go up there. The ceiling's like caving in.
Wow.
Right? And I go, are you still not going to fix it? Like literally, and she said, it's not in my budget. I quit, effective immediately. I'm gone.
Wow.
You know what I mean? It's like, and I had put 6 months into this owner and all their properties and getting things straightened out. And it's just like, it was just a valuable lesson, right? We can only work with people that see eye to eye. So to have my business model is to have a tough conversation at the jump with an owner, a tenant, and a vendor. What would you do if this happens? Like, what this is like, boom, 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 right? I like to lay it out and just see what they say, kind of like they should be doing to me, right? If I owned real estate and I was interviewing a property manager, I would run them through some scenarios, right? What do you do at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning when you get a call from that your AC's out? Are you troubleshooting it? Are you working with that tenant to turn on breakers, to try to clear the drain line? Or are you saying, oh, we'll call the vendor on Monday and hopefully they'll be out by Tuesday or Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, in certain parts of the world, like Florida, it doesn't work. I'm sure it doesn't work in Tulsa in January if someone doesn't have heat, right? You have to solve these situations. And if it costs a little bit extra money to your owner, that's part of the game,
Yeah. Valuable lessons, Danny Schwab. Valuable lessons. I appreciate it. A lot.
Where do you see, the market? Because to me, obviously, no insult to Tulsa, but Tulsa would be considered a small market, right?
Yeah.
You're a big fish, as they would say, in a smaller pond. How do you see the market and where it's been and going, from your bird's eye view?
So we definitely saw huge rent increases through 2021, 22. I would say our smallest increases came in the form of 6, 7, 8% jumps for renewing tenants, and they had nowhere to go, so they stayed. If we didn't have a tenant that stayed and we put the unit back to market openly, we were bumping rents, 10, 15, 20% sometimes. And now we're seeing that the appetite for those increases is not there. So we're keeping rent stable. We're on occasion lowering rent, but I don't think we're doing much of that at all. But we are certainly seeing that if we put a house, if we go for a rent renewal at, that was formerly $1,400 now at $1,500, and somebody says no, and we actually have that tenant leave, our ability to get $1,500 is probably not there. Right. So our best move is to keep rents flat, and explaining that to owners. For us, we're a cash flow investor market. And so having that conversation is way more difficult, and people don't always get that a lost month of rent at $1,500 is worth $100 times 15 months, right? Plus the make ready costs, plus our fee for leasing the property. So it's a difficult time for us to be in the business. We also see people that are not accommodating or understanding of the price of maintenance, which has gone through the roof. So it's just, in general, it's difficult.
Yeah, I would say to the average owner for a townhouse, 2 to 3 bedroom condo, or single family home, that the cost of turning your unit is $4,000 today.
Yeah,
they lose their mind.
Yeah,
they lose their mind. How is that? It's impossible. That's what it costs to get anybody. Like I like to say, in Florida, you have to have shoes, you have to have teeth if you want to work for me. If you want to do something like that, you got to be able to. Even to get into an HOA community, you have to have the right vehicle. You have to have a driver's license. Like the days of the Home Depot guys on the side of the road,
no.
You throw some money, it doesn't exist. And
not professional. Not professional.
No, and I mean the amount of like subcontractors and stuff that are, just their prices quadruple during the pandemic because people will pay it. People in Florida love to overpay to get to the front of the line. You tell a wealthy person here that, yeah, we'll take care of that in 2 weeks. They're like, what do you mean? What's wrong with tomorrow, right? So you see people jump in the line all the time. We've service work versus repair work became very difficult. Service calls versus updating, remodeling, turning became very difficult. A lot of those service people didn't want to do that anymore because they were stuck, in this whole phase of remodeling properties, updating properties. And it was, a lot of general contractors went under in Florida because they didn't have subcontractors anymore. So they could not perform because the subcontractors were taking on that work. So it's a wild ride when you get into the updating, turning, and, but it's a big part of my business, and it always has been. I really want to take on that add value property with that investor and say, hey man, you've been living in this cycle of vacancy and eviction and code enforcement hell. Why don't you
make it nicer? For sure.
I'll get you great people. I'll guarantee their rent for a year, just to get them to do it, and to be able to, that's one time where I feel like proud of myself. When I can take someone who's an investor or owns real estate and has just been stepping on their own, for their whole career. And I've turned properties over to them. They're like, wow, you changed, where the wife came to me like, you changed our life.
Wow.
I have a great video of a guy who says, before I met you, I hadn't had a good night of sleep in 20 years. Now I sleep well at night, because I know you're going to take care of it. You got me good tenants, because that I can't handle that whole investor mentality. I respect it. Don't get me wrong. It's a valuable thing. I'm not putting anyone down. It's just not for me in my business in any way.
Danny Schwab is the owner of Keyrenter Property Management of South Florida. He's owned and managed residential investment properties for 30 years because he's an old man, even though he doesn't look like it. He's married and he's got a 5-year-old daughter. Looking forward to welcoming you out to Tulsa in a couple of weeks, my friend. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Take care.
It's truly a pleasure and honor to see you today.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Same Day Podcast. Tune in to a new show each week and be sure to subscribe to get future episodes.